Hi, folks. For this week, covering the first half of the 19th century, we have so much that's going on that's consequential to environmental history that really it kind of defies uh, my ability to talk about it in a short video. In that period, you have the Industrial Revolution and the appearance of the first factories in American history. The beginning of the exploitation of fossil fuels in America, like coal and oil and ultimately natural gas. That's going on during the 19th century. You also have the expansion of the frontier, which pretty much overruns the area that we think about as the Midwest today. When Thomas Jefferson completed the Louisiana Purchase, Jefferson really believed that it would be the work of generations to colonize the lands that he was purchasing. If he just lived about another 20 years, he would have seen the majority of Louisiana Purchase actually being largely settled by pioneers. And so a huge amount is happening in the period that we're talking about. The textbook delves into the creation of the market economy. And it occurs to me that there's something connected to the market economy that maybe doesn't get as much play in our textbook, but that's worth considering. And that is the rise of American consumerism, which is very much with us today. If you go backwards in time to the period before the factory system, before mass production, ordinary people possessed relatively few items in their homes. If you could visit the house of someone in the colonial era, unless it was someone who was really wealthy, most people didn't have that much personal stuff. Clothing was typically still made at home, and so you wouldn't have a lot of clothing like people do today. You'd probably have your work clothing and maybe a set of your Sunday best, but people had relatively scarce amounts of personal possessions. When you think about items that become manufactured goods in the 19th century, they all have to be made under the old craft system in the colonial era, and that was expensive and time consuming. And what it means functionally is that ordinary people, for example, could not afford to own a pocket watch. That had to be made by a master clockmaker. Typically, you would go and place an order, and the person would ask you, what do you want your timepiece to look like? And you might describe what you had in your mind's eye, and he'd be making drawings and say, "This is what you're saying. What do you want the hands on the pocket watch to look like? Do you want the case to be made of silver or some other kind of metal?" And you'd put in your order, and then you'd go away, and the craftsman would tell you, "I'll see you in 3 months or 4 months or whatever, or I'll let you know when I'm done." And then you would go back, and you would be presented with what amounted to a work of art. It would be entirely made by hand. All the springs and gears, all of the components that went into your pocket watch would all have been made for that item. And of course, that's going to be very expensive. And if something breaks, you have to take it back to a master craftsman, and they have to probably make or replace a part custom made for that item. And so, people told time from the sun, from the chiming of the bells, if they lived in a community with church bells. But generally speaking, ordinary people did not own a timepiece because they're simply too expensive. And there's a lot of other similar sorts of manufactured products that are like that. When we get into the 19th century, with the Industrial Revolution, suddenly you have mass-produced consumer goods with that are identical, made with interchangeable parts, which takes us back to Eli Whitney. The inventor of the cotton gin also had a rifle factory or musket factory, and he sold mass-produced firearms for the United States Army. And that was a revolutionary concept. They all had parts that you could order and replace if something went bad. They also all took uniform-sized ammunition. And so what we're entering into then is the era of mass-produced consumer goods. The price goes down, but then you have the consequences of consumerism, which is obviously the impact on the environment is going to be increased if all the raw materials that have to go into all of this stuff that people are purchasing has to be sourced out there in the environment. So the kind of the burden of humanity on nature is going to increase. And I would argue also that this begins the reality that we face today, which is many of us live in homes that are crammed full of consumer goods that we bought at some point in the past, and oftentimes we haven't used or haven't looked at or don't really need, but many of us are hoarders. We keep all of that stuff, and then it's up to our children or family members ultimately to decide what to do with all the accumulation of a lifetime. And that I just went through that with my stepmom. That's a big job when people have accumulated during an entire lifetime all of these consumer goods. So hope you have a great week, and I'll talk to you folks later.